All right. Welcome, Deep Dive Sports fans. It's David. I'm joined with Evan for the first time in a long time.
Been a
But
minute.
yeah. So welcome back. Glad to have you back on, number
Thank
one.
you.
Um, but anyways, we just wanted to, I know that it's halfway point of the NBA season, and they just finished up All-Star break, and not long before that, they finished the trade deadline as well.
Mhm.
And so, since this is kind of the first time we've been able to actually talk about this, wanted to talk about a couple major trades, how we think the second half of the NBA season will go, and if we get around to it, actually talking about the All-Star break. So, anyways. What we're going to start off with is the actual like major surprise trade that had happened on the 2nd of February. That was the LA Lakers, Dallas Mavericks, and Utah Jazz trade,
Mhm.
in which LA got Luka Doncic, Maxi Kleber. Is that how you say his name?
Yeah, Kleber.
Yeah. I don't know why my when I put this
Autocorrect.
in. So we are right now reading off of kind of like a Google Doc at the moment, just to uh, kind of keep
Yeah.
track of things and how we do things and all that. And so we had Markieff Morris, which also went to LA, and it decided to translate Markieff Morris into Married Morris for some reason. Um, and they all received this from Dallas.
Mhm.
And then Dallas in return got Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and a 2029 Lakers first round pick. And then Utah just kind of got thrown in there and picked up Jalen Hood Schifino and
Mhm.
two second round Lakers draft picks. So, first and foremost, before I give my thoughts, what do you think?
There is so much that I think, David. The first thing, just as I think back to when this trade went through, a couple of weeks ago now, and I want to say it was like 11:30 p.m. It was pretty
It was
late.
late. Yeah.
Um, and I have the notification on from Shams. He's the major newsbreaker kind of for the NBA. And he, put this trade in. Basically, he had said at that time just Luka Doncic and Anthony Davis are going to be traded for each other. And everyone on, every social media, Twitter or X, whatever you call it, Blue Sky, Instagram, everyone was like, this is fake. Like, he literally got hacked. Like, this cannot be real. And then he put another tweet like 5 minutes later that was like, this is actually real. And people were still like, no, I don't think I don't think this is real because it was honestly unbelievable that Luka Doncic, a guy, still a young star in the NBA, 25 years old, has been all NBA first team already 5 times. These guys don't get traded at this point in their career. Like, you know,
Mhm.
someone likened it to this would be like if the Cavs had traded LeBron in, the year after they went to the finals in 2007. It would be like if they would have
Mhm.
traded him at that time. That's kind of what this is like. And, the more that came out about it, it kind of the Mavericks GM Nico Harrison tried to kind of explain himself, but the more that came out, it kind of just I feel like made him look worse. His
Mhm.
main reasoning behind it, two reasons, I guess, were he felt that defense is most important and defense wins championships. So he traded for Anthony Davis, who is a great defensive player. He said we're in the finals last year and our defense just wasn't good enough to stop the Celtics, which, okay, but the only reason you were in the finals in the first place
Was because of Luca.
was because of Luca. That's the only reason you made it to the finals in the first place.
Maybe you can throw in Kyrie,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Kyrie
but
played well.
at
Um,
that point he was the second player.
Right, right. He played well. They had some good role players that stepped up, but Luca was clearly the main like engine getting them to the finals.
Yeah.
And then he talked a lot about like or he didn't really say it, but it kind of came out that he was really worried about Luca's conditioning and, essentially saying he was out of shape and all of this kind of stuff. And he was worried that he wouldn't be able to, play at the top level being out of shape, which again, he's still putting up some of the best numbers in the league, whether he's in shape or
Mm,
not. Um, there's a guy that a lot of people say is out of shape is Nikola Jokic, who's widely considered the best basketball player on earth, and led the Nuggets a couple years ago to a championship.
mm,
It really does just add up. And the last thing that really kind of makes him look bad is it came out that when he decided he wanted to trade Luca, he only reached out to the Lakers. He only talked to Rob Pelinka, who's the Lakers GM, who, is one of his good friends. And basically Rob Pelinka from the Lakers didn't even believe him at first that he would trade Luka Doncic, and essentially they started talking it over, very very quietly over a couple weeks until the deal was finally done. But at the same time, if you're going to trade Luka Doncic, why not tell every other GM and say whoever can give me the best package because you could probably get a better package
mm-hmm.
than Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and one first round pick. I like Anthony Davis. I think, he gets a lot of critiques. I think he's a very good player. He is one of the best defensive players in the league. But if you're
Mm-hmm.
trading Luka Doncic, I think teams would have given you more.
Yeah.
Like it's almost
Oh,
like
100%.
if you try to take it outside of basketball, it's almost like you trade like I don't even know what they're on iPhone. You trade your iPhone 16 for like an iPhone 13. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, the iPhone 13 is still good, but you're trading a newer model that's going to last longer. Anthony Davis is 6 years older than Luka Doncic. And unfortunately, the big unfortunate part of this is Anthony Davis got a chance to suit up for one game for the Mavericks, played really well, but he got hurt. And he's now going to be out, at least a month, it's looking like, which that's the main critique of Anthony Davis is that he can't stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually was staying healthy for the past couple of years on the Lakers. And you trade for him, you trade, your superstar, your franchise player, again, the best or one of the best young players in the league for a guy, and he immediately gets hurt. So again, I know that's a lot of things I'm throwing out there, but there's just so many
Yeah.
things to touch on this. But that's my thoughts. I think unfortunately, uh, for Dallas and for their fans, I really don't think this is going to turn out well for them in the long term. Um, you know, maybe if Anthony Davis gets back healthy, maybe they have 1 or 2 years to really go after a championship.
Mm-hmm.
But they, I mean, they could have had 8 to 10 more years to be in that top contender role if they would have just kept Luka. I mean, this team made the finals last year. Like, it's not like
Yeah.
they were, underachieving. Um, so it kind of just blew my mind, and it really was, I think, definitely I think the most shocking trade in NBA history, and I think one of the most shocking trades in honestly in the major four sports uh in the history. It's just because nobody saw it coming. It wasn't like Luca requested a trade or anything like that. It came out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just remember when it happened, I was actually in Columbus
Hmm.
down visiting Nick, and it was me, Nick, and Dom. We were all there. We're just chilling out, right?
Yeah.
We're just chilling out, playing some video games, and I get the alert. Well, mind you, we're playing like NCAA 25 or whatever.
Hmm.
And I get the alert, and before I even say anything, I was like, did this really happen?
Exactly.
And once I found out that this most likely definitely happened, I I tell both Dom and Nick, and they both looked like I was just gotten out of a mental asylum or something.
Yeah.
Thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they did their own research that they're like, there is some truth to this. And so, and then side note, I think we need to talk about the real winners of this trade, the Utah
Utah
Jazz.
Jazz?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not?
So that might be a hot take to some, but the Utah Jazz in reality won this trade because you got a solid player in Hood Schifino
Mhm.
and you
Young
got,
guy,
huh?
a young player too, you
Yeah.
know.
And two second round draft picks. Yes, chances are those won't mean anything
Mhm.
in all likelihood. But the fact that you have two opportunities to draft maybe the next Nikola Jokic in the second round or the next uh who is it? Well, I can't think of his name. Draymond Green
Mhm.
in the second round.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either of those two guys would be good draft picks in the second round
Hmm.
or someone similar.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, and they
And
didn't give up anything. They
yeah,
just
on top of that, they didn't give up anything at all.
they had to be in there just to make, make the money work essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah. The
The
thing that's crazy too is
Mhm.
and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
You're good.
um it's been reported also that Utah didn't actually know what the other pieces of the trade were.
Mm,
Basically, they were contacted by the Lakers and they were like, "Hey, we have a trade that's happening. We essentially just need to give a team Jalen Hood-Schifino and two second round, like Jalen Hood-Schifino, and then we'll give you a couple second round picks to make this trade happen." And they were like, "Yeah, okay." They probably figured, maybe it was a trade for just like a center or something like that.
mm.
And it turned out afterwards it was the biggest trade in NBA history, and they didn't even realize they were going to be involved in it, which is kind of crazy too.
Yeah. So I think just in just deal making terms, just the fact that you didn't even have to give up anything for
Hmm.
something,
Yeah.
I think is the real winner of it all. But if we're just looking at pure like talent wise, then LA won the trade.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think the thing that a lot of people have been talking about too, and we saw Luca, I think it was maybe two games, maybe just, I think actually it was just maybe one game before, because this trade also happened right before the All-Star break. So it's kind of weird because Anthony Davis and Luca also were both hurt initially with minor injuries when the trade came through.
Mm,
Then they had to wait a couple days to get healthy and stuff. And then, the All-Star break came. So I think it was only one, maybe two games from Luca that we saw. And he didn't play amazing in those first couple of games. I think he had 14 points. Kind of typical or even lower than his standard stuff. But the thing that's crazy is the first two games after they made the trade, it looked like LeBron James went back in like a time machine 10 years. He put up like 40 points. He looked like he was you know
mm,
29, 30-year-old LeBron James. And I think it also just revitalized him. He liked Anthony Davis, but I think when he realized he got to play with Luca, again, one of the top young stars in the game, I think that just kind of revitalized LeBron. And might give him a little more juice for, the rest of this season, next season, however long he ends up playing. I think just the fact that he knows that, hey, we have one of the top players in the game, that means we have a chance. Again, they're not at the top of the standings right now, but they're firmly within that top six. So they're going to be in the playoffs. And
mm,
obviously, I think they're an improved team now after this Luka trade. So I think, obviously, of course, you get the benefit of getting Luka, but I think for the short term, you get kind of LeBron really wanting to give it his all because he knows that they have, a shot to potentially, do some damage in the playoffs.
mm. Oh yeah, definitely. And then so let's kind of move on to the other major trade that I found. And it kind of does affect us a little bit. and
Hmm.
that is the Cleveland Atlanta trade.
Hmm.
So the Cavs received DeAndre Hunter, and in return, Atlanta received Karis LeVert, Georges Niang, three second round picks, and two pick swaps as well. Now, I don't know what pick swaps are. I am not all too familiar with the NBA draft outside of the fact that there's two rounds in it.
Yeah.
Um,
So a pick
so,
swap, I can try to explain it.
okay.
In its purest form, it's just a pick swap means if you trade for a pick swap, um, you get the option to swap picks with whatever team you're trading for. So, like if there was a team, two teams had a first round pick, one team had the 20th pick, one team had the 10th pick, but then they had a pick swap, that team with the 20th pick could then actually take the 10th pick and then they essentially swap their picks. It does get really messy because as these keep getting traded from team to team to team,
Mm,
all of those teams start getting added in. So then it's like you get the best of the Cavs, the Bucks, and the Thunder picks or something like that. So it starts to get really confusing, but that's kind of the essential point of a pick swap. So it's
okay.
not pick in and of itself, but it's a chance to have maybe a little bit of a slightly better pick than you would have had with your own.
Okay. Uh, the more you know. But anyways, what are your
Ex-
thoughts on this one?
I first of all, I mean, I'll start I think from the Cavs perspective because that's the perspective I know the most. I really like this trade for the Cavs.
Mm,
Ever since honestly LeBron left, the Cavs have not really had a true shoot small forward on the team that is a true like starting caliber small forward. I mean they have Max Strus, but Max Strus really is more of a shooting guard, pure and simple. He's not a big guy. He's not long in terms of like his wingspan. Um, and for years that's kind of been what the Cavs have been missing, right? They've had Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. They've had Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. It's been that fifth spot that they've been missing. And they make this move for DeAndre Hunter, who is having by far the best season of his career right now, averaging 19 points a game. Um, he was really the front runner for the Sixth Man of the Year award. Now, he still maybe if the Cavs still decide to bring him off the bench. I think either way, whatever they do, I think he'll be helpful for the team. Um, but he may end up starting as well at that small forward spot. So, they get a guy that really can score alongside their other four guys, and they get a guy who he's not, you know, I'm not going to say he's a defensive player of the year level kind of player, but he's a guy who's big enough, strong enough to be able to stay in front of, your players like a Jason Tatum, like a Jaylen Brown, like a Jalen Brunson, like some of these guys that the Cavs are going to have to go up against in the playoffs. Um, so I really like that trade for the Cavs, especially for the fact that you didn't have to give up too much to get him. You do give up
mm.
Karis LeVert. I think that's the biggest, loss of this trade from the Cavs' point of view. But Karis LeVert, he kind of has a lot of the same skill set of a guy like a Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland. Just he's maybe like a B minus version of those guys. I think it's helpful for the Cavs to be able to get something a little bit different. Again, a bigger wing who can shoot and play defense, which is something they didn't necessarily have. And you give up Georges Niang. I think for him, um, he was definitely streaky as a player for the Cavs. Um, I think he was a big locker room piece. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing you're giving up with him. And then, you know, you are giving up those second round picks. We talked about earlier, second round picks can be, guys like Jokic, can be guys like Draymond Green. At the same time, more often than they're not, they aren't those star players. More often
Mm.
than not, they are guys that unfortunately don't get a lot of playing time in the league or flame out after a couple of years. Um, so I think for the value that you're getting for the Cavs, uh, and in terms of what you're giving up, I think this is a really good trade. And I've seen a lot of after trade deadline, people want to grade all of the trades, and most analysts and podcasts and other things I've listened to have really liked trade as well for the Cavs. And we've gotten to see Hunter a little bit as well in his first couple games, again before the trade deadline. And he didn't have the craziest individual numbers during those games, but the Cavs, those last two games before the trade deadline, they destroyed the teams that they went against. I know it was the Timberwolves, and I can't remember the other team that they played right before the deadline, but the Raptors, I believe. And it wasn't even close. So we kind of, I think, saw a little bit of that immediate impact
Mm,
uh, that DeAndre Hunter can bring to the Cavs. Um, I'll quickly go over the Atlanta side. Um, Honestly, I think this is another situation where Atlanta maybe could have gotten more from the Cavs. Atlanta is seemingly giving up on DeAndre Hunter in terms of they're giving away a good player, so they're trying to get maybe they got some picks. But you would think they might want some younger players. Like surprised they weren't even able to get a guy like a Jalen Tyson or even like an Amani Bates, someone that they could just take like a flyer on.
mm,
Um, but they didn't really get any young players on the other side of this. So it's another one where you're selling on DeAndre Hunter because he's having a really good year this year. But I think Atlanta probably could have got more.
mm.
Uh, I mean, maybe they did send out more offers out there, and maybe the Cavs just were the best one. But I think they potentially could have got more. But selfishly, I'm happy that the Cavs were able to get the deal
Yeah.
done here. So,
I mean, it definitely could be a lot worse on both sides, I guess you could put
mhm,
it. Um, Obviously, the Atlanta fans are probably not happy that one of their better players, obviously not the best player on their team, definitely one of the better,
mhm,
got sent someplace else for not really much if I'm looking at it from an outside perspective.
yeah,
Obviously, I don't want to see Karras leave. G- Georges, like you said, he's hit or miss depending on the week. Um, but yeah, and the fact that they didn't even get a first round pick out of him,
mhm, yeah,
that isn't really a whole lot. And
yeah,
so, I mean, initially it looked kind of like a lot. Um, but the more you think about it, it's not really.
right, right. And the one thing I forgot to mention too that is kind of weird about this, again, it's
Mm,
like the Hawks are giving up one of their better players. Maybe they're trying to, kind of get in that rebuild mode, but they also don't have their next three first round picks because they actually traded them to San Antonio for the DeJounte Murray, who they then traded to New Orleans this past year. So, I could see it if they're like, you know what, let's trade DeAndre Hunter and let's just kind of tank out the rest of the season and try to improve our lottery odds, but they don't have their pick for this year. So
hmm
that's also what's kind of weird about this deal too. It's like if you don't have your own pick, you might as well kind of stay good. At least I guess good, average. Um, so it's kind of weird for the Hawks, but
hmm
a lot of people also say it was just kind of a potentially a cost-cutting move there,
Yeah.
worried about his contract and potentially down the line he probably would be eligible for a bigger contract now that he's, having some of his better seasons. Um, but yeah,
hmm
it was kind of weird for the Hawks for me, but the Hawks,
They did what
I
they
haven't been
did.
super impressed by their decision making the last few years, quite honestly. And
Mm,
I wouldn't be surprised if this is honestly more of a precursor to potentially a Trae Young trade in the offseason.
mm,
Um, I wouldn't be too surprised because right now where they are, they're kind of just stuck at that point where it's like, okay, we're probably gonna make the play in. That might be the best we can do. That's not really the point you want to be at in the NBA. You either
mm,
want to be, you know, contending for championships or you want to be at least at the bottom and ready to start over, right? So
mm,
maybe this would make more sense if we do see them moving off of Trae Young, maybe in a way to try to get their picks. Maybe they somehow get their picks back in the offseason.
mm,
We saw like Brooklyn do that this past offseason. So maybe it's something where they kind of did this now and then they're really going to start the rebuild maybe in the offseason when they have a bit more time and they're not under, the time
Yeah.
comes trade deadline. But it's kind of strange to me.
Yeah. And I just remember pretty much ever since we started doing nothing but net and talking basketball, we always, whether it was me, you, Nick, we've always kind of questioned Atlanta a little bit
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
know
some of
Nick
their
always
just,
has.
yeah, especially, oh, who was that one center that they had? I've drawn a blank. He didn't care for the one center that they had like 2 years ago.
Was
And
it
I think he was an older guy too.
Clint Capella maybe?
No, he
Capella?
liked he liked Clint Capella. Oh, now it's gonna
Not
bug me.
remembering right
But
now.
anyways, there his big issue was they were holding on to players that they didn't necessarily need anymore, and they
Mhm.
could have gone for better players at the time.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his big issue that he had at the time.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
And
huh?
I would agree with that to
Yeah.
some extent. Yeah.
Anyways, is there any kind of other trade that you were interested in maybe talking about?
Um, I think I think it might be interesting just to mention the trade that ended up not being a trade. I don't know if you saw this
Oh, the other
anything
LA
about this
Lakers play
the
trade.
Mark Williams trade to
Yeah.
the Lakers. They had traded for so essentially the main concern after the Lakers got Luka was they traded Anthony Davis. They really don't have any centers or big men
Mm,
to kind of hold down their fort. So everyone thought, they're going to trade for a center, which they did end up initially making a trade for Mark Williams from the Hornets.
mm.
Um, and he's a good young center. Um, they kind of thought he might be a guy that might be able to grow alongside Luka. A lot of people liked the move. They had traded Dalton Connect, Lakers, this year's first round pick for him.
Mm.
Until they didn't, which is um, Mark Williams went through his all NBA trades they're announced, but they're not official until a physical goes through. So the Lakers did their physical with Mark Williams, and essentially they found a lot of concerning injury issues that kind of lied underneath the surface. They found they were very concerned specifically, I think, about his knees and ankles that he's had quite a bit of injuries about.
Yeah,
And
because I was wondering why that got rescinded to begin with.
yeah, so essentially once they got through that physical, they're like, they essentially said he didn't pass our physical, and so we don't want this trade to go through anymore. So essentially they had too many concerns about his injuries that they didn't feel it was worth it to trade for him anymore. And
Mm.
the trade obviously is pending those physicals. So the weird thing about it though was obviously it's
That-
like you got to think about the player side of things, right? You get traded like a guy like Mark Williams, he gets traded from the Hornets,
and then
not a very
commit.
good, not a very good team. He's like, oh, I'm gonna play with Luke, I'm gonna play with LeBron until then the trade gets rescinded and all of a sudden he's back with the Hornets. So now you're back with the team that traded you away, which I feel
Hmm.
like has to be kind of weird. And same side for the Lakers with Dalton Connect. He was
Connect. Yeah, yeah,
actually
yeah. Connect.
yeah, he was actually on the bench for one Charlotte game, like just sitting and watching before the trade got rescinded. So he flew out to Charlotte, watched the game with them, and then he's like, "Oh, well, gotta go back to the Lakers." Again, now he's in the locker room, kind of probably feels a certain type of way that they, traded him away essentially.
Mm,
Um, and then he did end up like playing again before the trade deadline. So it's just very interesting. It's not something that happens very often,
mm.
um, in the NBA or really in sports in general, that you do end up seeing a team actually get the physical results back and say, you know what, we'll we'll go ahead and undo this trade before it becomes
Yeah,
official.
because when you
Very
think about
strange.
it, now they're kind of open to defensive issues as well.
Yeah, that's the one, big concern for sure with the Lakers.
Because it's like, yes, you can score a lot of points, and that's great and all. especially if the team that you're playing can't do that.
Yeah.
But if they have decent to solid defense, then you're pretty much screwed, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Yeah. That's kind of the point where if you do look at the Lakers, a lot of people obviously are excited about this trade for Luca, but I don't think a lot of people think, they're gonna just go and win the championship this year because they do still have these holes, right?
Mhm. And it's major
They
holes too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the center, especially for defense, is the most important position on the defensive side of the ball. So they still have Jackson Hayes, who they've had, not really a big defensive guy. They actually signed Alex Len, again, not the best defensive center in the world. So that's definitely, their big hole that they'll have for this season. I honestly wonder if, like, a couple of years back, I think LeBron actually played quite a bit of center. I wonder if they'll go into that at all, just for his, rebounding and potential defensive upside. But yeah, the Lakers definitely, no matter what they end up doing this year, they definitely will have to address that center position in the offseason still,
Hmm.
for sure. Sure.
And I guess that kind of ties into this next part. And how do you think the second half will be for this NBA season?
Yeah, I mean, I think the teams that are at the top right now, I still feel very confident in as kind of my teams that I would consider like the title contenders. The Thunder, the Celtics. I do have the Cavs up there as well. I do think they've shown a lot this season and shown that they're really up in that tighter contender role. Um, and then the other team who's had a really strong last few months or so has been the Denver Nuggets. They struggled to start the season, but they've kind of come on very strong. Um, that I think they're up to the 3 seed in the West now. Those are really my four teams
Yeah.
that I think if I had to make predictions, for the conference finals, those would be my four teams that I would pick right now to do it. So I think there may be some movement otherwise in the standings. I think maybe the a team like unfortunately the Mavericks may have some struggles because outside of Anthony Davis, they also lost Daniel Gafford and they already have oh my gosh, why am I forgetting his name? They already have their other young center that is out with injury as well. So they have no centers also
Mm. And
right
right now
now.
they're at the eighth seed right now.
Yeah, yeah, Derek Lively is who I was talking about. But
Okay.
and the other team that's kind of down there that potentially has the opportunity to move up a bit is the Warriors. That's the other big
Mm.
trade we didn't really discuss is they did get Jimmy Butler from the Heat. Um, I think they may move up in the second part of the season, but I honestly still don't have them in that top tier that I have those other top four. And I think they might be able to be a little dangerous, maybe get to the second round of the playoffs, something like that. But I think those four teams for me have really separated themselves just with the consistency of what they've done throughout this really first, they say halfway point, but it's really, if you look at the games, it's really about a two-thirds of the way through the
Mm.
regular season at this point. So the Thunder, Nuggets, and then Celtics and Cavs are my kind of top four that I have right now.
Yeah. And I think the biggest surprise for me right at the moment is the Phoenix Suns being 2 games under
Yeah, yeah.
500 right at the
They
moment.
have they have had it rough. They
Yeah.
they yeah, that's a tough one. I that's another one I talked about Trey Young. That's another one where if they don't really turn things around, which I think will be hard for them, I could see crazy as it is to say, I could see Kevin Durant being another guy that's traded in the offseason. It just really
Mm.
what they wanted to do when they brought him in and brought in Bradley Beal, those two and Devin Booker as their big three. It really just has not worked.
Hmm.
That's another team that really, again, we talk about it, the importance of the center position. They don't really have a true solid center you can depend on. They traded a couple weeks before the deadline for another young Charlotte Hornets center, Nick Richards. um, who is an improvement over what they were getting from, Plumlee and some of their other guys. But they really just don't have the defense. Bradley Beal at this point is kind of a shell of what he once was. He's coming off the bench now. Uh, they're just yeah, they're really struggling, which is, I mean, I believe they're probably I think they are the highest payroll in the league, if not very close to it as well.
Hmm.
Um, and for them to be right now, if the season ended today, they wouldn't even make the play in. Which
Yeah, because
I
they're right
know
now
that
sitting at 11 at 26
yeah,
and 28,
yeah, uh,
and it looks like they're two and a half, yeah, 2.5 games back,
yeah. So I mean,
almost
it's
three at this point.
and the teams above them. I mean, I think the West is very interesting. I do think there's that top tier, but then there's a lot of
Or,
teams in this kind of middle tier with
sorry, game and a half. I
game and a
can't
half.
do
Yeah, yeah.
math.
With the Warriors, Kings, Mavericks, Wolves, Lakers, Clippers, Rockets. I think that whole tier, it's going to be really hard for them to substantially move up the standings. Um, so yeah, that's been a big disappointment, definitely.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of the big surprise right at the moment, especially considering the past couple of years that they've had, is the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, yeah, but they're kind of on the opposite side, right, of
Mm-hmm.
the Suns. They're having a very solid year, and a guy we know well, JB Biggerstaff, our former or Cavs
Mm-hmm.
former head coach, I think has done a good job with them. I always felt he was really well suited to coach a young team, a team that's,
Mm-hmm.
kind of trying to make a rise. That's I think what he did well when he took over for the Cavs. That's kind of when they started to, not immediately, but they started to kind of get on their path towards the team that they are now. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think give JB a lot of credit. Their defense has been very solid as well. And then Cade Cunningham, he's been great for them this year. He made his first All-Star game. Um, so they've kind of been kind of riding him leading them. And yeah, they're right now again in the sixth position, especially compared to, the train wreck that was their season last year, and
Mm-hmm.
their whatever it was, 21 game losing streak or whatever the heck
Yeah.
they had. Uh, this is a great
Yeah, because
position for them.
didn't they set the record last year?
Yeah, the longest losing streak in NBA history last year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for them to be again at the sixth seed right now, they wouldn't have to be in the play-in. And actually they're 2.5 games up on the Magic for that sixth seed. So
Yeah.
I think they got to feel really good about where they are, and they're still a young team, so they have plenty of room to grow as well. So I would think Pistons fans out there, I would think that they're probably pretty excited for the season they're having and what's, their future that's up ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And honestly, this is the best Cavalier season that they've had. I think with the addition of DeAndre Hunter, it'll be great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been an
Um,
awesome season.
mhm. And then I think that they can, with that help, they'll also keep the Oklahoma City Thunder in control as well.
Hmm.
Because I remember the game that I went to was the first game of Oklahoma City,
Mm.
and that was an amazing game.
Yeah, that was the one that was real close and the Cavs pulled it out at the end, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
That
was
was
an exciting game. And then obviously you and I went to the Toronto game afterwards,
yeah,
the
which
day
was a
later.
little more exciting than we would have expected, but
Mm.
that was a
And
fun game
so,
too.
and then literally what, like a week later, they played each other again, not even.
Yeah. Yeah, the Thunder.
And then the Thunder controlled that game.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I completely agree with your assessment that you made earlier in the top four teams as well. I just wanted to throw in a couple surprises there as
Yeah, for
well.
sure. For sure.
And then, you know what? Even though I didn't pay much attention to the All-Star break, you want to talk about how do you think that went?
Sure, we'll talk about it a little bit. So first I'll start off with I guess the context of for the past, I don't know, 5 years, whatever it's been, really, I think 2020 was the last All-Star game that people think was really good, really entertaining,
Mm,
right? There's been a lot of conversation the past few years of the All-Star game and the whole All-Star weekend. Just it's not good. Nobody cares about it. Players don't try. Um, so that's kind of the context to where I'm kind of thinking about things.
mm,
I did not see Friday night with the Celebrity Game and the Rising Stars, so I can't really speak much to that. But going into to Saturday night with the three-point competition and the dunk contest, the three-point competition I would say was just pretty average for what it was. We did get Tyler Hero winning. For a while, Darius Garland was in the lead, and he did make it to the final round, so I was really pulling from there, but he kind of got cold in the final round. Um, Unfortunately, there was a lot of talk that, last year they did the three-point shootout between Steph Curry and Sabrina Ionescu. Um, there was a lot of talk that they were going to bring that back. This time they were trying to include Caitlin Clark in that as well. Um, and it ended up that Caitlin Clark ended up declining that invitation. Um, she said, she wanted her first three-point contest to be in the WNBA at their All-Star game, which is actually going to be in Indianapolis next year, which,
mm.
makes sense. That's her, her city where she plays, so I can understand that. But I think that was a lot of fun last year, so we kind of missed out on that this year. Um, the dunk contest, again, it's another one where people have talked a lot about, it's not as good as it once was. Um, the past 2 years, it was won, before this year, it was won by Mac McClung, who was technically a G League player, not even really a full NBA player.
Mm.
And spoiler alert, he won again. It was a three-peat. But I will say, I think I thought the dunk contest was very entertaining. Like, if you have a chance, what I would say is if anyone wants to go back, I would just watch honestly the dunks, all of the four dunks of the two guys who made the finals, which was Mac McClung and Stephon Castle. Um, they had some really good dunks, especially Mac McClung jumping over the Kia, if anyone saw that. Over the
Like fully
Kia
over the Kia
fully over, not like Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin years ago, he jumped like over the hood.
hood. Yeah.
No, he jumped over the top part of the Kia and grabbed the ball from a guy sticking out of the moonroof,
Mm.
um,
Or
and
the
dunked it.
sunroof,
I
I guess
mean,
you could call it.
yeah, yeah. So I thought it was very entertaining, honestly. Mac McClung is an insane dunker. I think it helps
Mm.
that he's kind of short, so when he jumps super high, it's very impressive. So
And
I would
then
say
and then
if
followed it
anyone's
up
gonna
with
watch it, just watch those two guys dunks. Don't watch Modest Buzelis or Andre Jackson Jr. They barely even made any dunks. Uh,
mm,
so I would watch those two guys. I thought that part of those two at least were entertaining as a part of the dunk
mm,
contest. It is hard. People say, it stinks because there's no star players in it anymore. And
mm,
I agree with that somewhat, but it's just kind of on my side, it's like, what can you really do? They don't want to go out and, like imagine, I don't know who would be a guy. Like imagine John Morant goes out there, goes to do the Kia dunk, just misses it, and then, tears his ACL or something. Like they don't want to risk injury for this dunk contest. Um, Now, with that being said, after the dunk contest, I think Giannis and John Morant actually were like on Twitter saying like, "Oh, we might do it next year."
mm.
They probably won't, but maybe they will, and that would be pretty cool if they did. So,
Mm.
all in all, I think that was somewhat entertaining. Um, I think it
Yeah.
was, I think it was cool. It was hard that there's no stars in it, but I think the dunk
Yeah.
contest was pretty cool.
Maybe they do somewhat similar to NHL, where they do kind of like a Four Nations face-off.
Yeah, well, and so in that leads right into actually into the Sunday um All-Star game, which they did actually change up the format this year, somewhat similar actually to the NHL, although I don't think it has quite the luster, but I'll explain. They picked. they had four teams do essentially a mini tournament, and it
Mm,
was three teams full of the NBA All-Stars, and then the fourth team was the team that won the Rising Stars Challenge on Friday.
mm,
Um, and so then they put these three teams together with the All-Stars. It was a draft where the three GMs were Shaq, Kenny the Jetsmith, and Charles Barkley. It was the draft was basically rigged so that they would have a team of what they called Shaq's OGs. So that was like the old guys, your Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Kyrie. LeBron was on the team, although he ended up not playing in the game. Um, and then there was Kenny's, I don't know what Kenny's Young Guns or something like that.
mm,
That was the young team. We had two of our Cavs on that team, Donovan, or not Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland and Evan Mobley. They were on that team with a lot of the other young all-stars. And then they had Chuck's team, which was the international players. So, Jokic, Giannis, Shea. Donovan Mitchell was weirdly on that team. I think they just ran out of spots to put him on the other team, so they put him in that team for some reason. Um, and then they did a little mini tournament. So um, what they did was they just played these mini games where it was just first to score 40. So Shaq's team, um, the OGs went up against the Rising Stars, and that game was pretty interesting actually because the Rising Stars, who again are the best first and
yeah.
second year players, they're not all-star players, they actually kept it pretty competitive with the All-Stars. So I thought that was actually pretty interesting. And then uh, Chuck's team, the international team, then beat the young guys, and then we had the international team against the OGs, I guess, in the final game. But what I'll say, I think the actual basketball that was being played was pretty good. Like it was still obviously you're never gonna get intensity of a regular season or a postseason game.
Mm,
But it was still there were people were actually somewhat trying on defense. We had some blocks, which you don't normally see, especially when it got close to that target score of 40. The intensity got upped a little bit. The problem, as I was watching it live, was there was just so many breaks. There were so many commercials. There was so many just random stoppages. So I saw somebody break this down, and it was the entire time of Sunday night, um, broken down. And actual basketball, it was a 3 hour, you know, broadcast.
yeah.
Actual basketball was only about, I think it was 34 minutes of the entire 3 hour broadcast. 80 minutes of it was commercials. So almost half of it was commercials.
Dang.
It had a weird thing where they had Mr. Beast show up and he picked a guy out of the crowd to shoot a half court shot, and this guy had to make one before Damian Lillard made three, and it was really awkward because both guys just kept missing for like 10 minutes, and then finally the guy from the crowd did make it, so he got like $100,000. And then the weirdest part though was during the final game, it was it was like 10 points into the game. And the international team, like they started off, they were like missing all their shots. So it was like 11-1.
Mm,
And then they stopped the game and they went to commercial, but then they came back from commercial and then they did this whole like tribute to TNT because TNT after this year will not have the rights to NBA games anymore. They're going to NBC and Amazon and ESPN's keeping them. So they did this whole like tribute that took like 20 minutes just in the middle of the game, which kind of just like killed all the momentum of the game itself. And then by that point, it was just like the players then had to sit on the bench for like 20 minutes after just
mm,
playing. And so I think just the broadcasting itself of it like really just killed the whole
mm,
event and the whole hype of Sunday night. Like in the past couple of years, the big complaint have been, the players aren't trying, they don't care, that's why the game is bad. I think the players did pretty well in terms of their effort level, I think just everything else that they had on Sunday night, like,
Just kind of ruined
just
everything.
killed it. Just killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
So, and it's weird because now everyone's like, well, people complained about it, so they probably were gonna change this. They're probably gonna change the format again, so they're probably not gonna do this four teams again. And
Mm,
I think that's also hard if you keep changing it every year. People like don't want to watch it because they're like, obviously, if they're changing it every year, they know it's like not the best quality.
yeah.
So I think that kind of hurts it as well. Another thing that really kind of frustrated me about it is right before the game where they had the Rising Stars playing, um, Draymond Green was talking and he was basically like trashing. He was like, the Rising Stars shouldn't be here. This game's gonna be terrible. Which the game, like I said, actually ended up being competitive.
Mm,
But it was like it was really weird because it was basically right before the game that they're trying to like get us excited about. It was actually just Draymond like crapping all over it. So it was really strange. Uh
mm,
so I'm actually kind of hopefully optimistic that, next year it's not going to be TNT. It's actually going to be NBC coming back
mm,
to basketball for NBA basketball for the first time in a long time.
mm,
And they're going to have the All-Star game. So hopefully they can kind of change things up and put a little more focus on the actual players playing the game.
mhm.
I think that's the part that's,
Most
actually
important.
people want to see.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so it's just weird. It was strange to me for
yeah.
sure.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it other than that.
hey, I think you did well on that one. But yeah, like I said before, I didn't get the chance to actually watch much of it. Um, so any other final thoughts you want to bring up real quick before we end it?
No, I mean, I'll just say I'm excited for the second half of the year.
Hmm.
There's definitely going to be some good uh races coming down, especially at the bottom of these Western and Eastern Conference, the race for the play-in, the race for that sixth seed. I
Hmm.
think it's going to be very intense, very exciting. So I'm excited for the next half of the season, and then I feel like playoffs will be around before we know it. So I
Hmm.
think exciting basketball is to come, which is always good. And we actually do have our first game after the All-Star break tonight, which is a rescheduled game, and it's actually Lakers versus Hornets. Uh, it's actually rescheduled from when they had the LA Fires. Um,
Oh, okay. I
but
was
it's
like, how
actually
is
very
that
interesting.
rescheduled? I mean, it's an
It's
NBA
actually
game.
very funny because it's the two teams that had that failed trade go
Yeah.
through. So uh Dalton Connect and Mark Williams, I think, are both supposed to play now. So people are saying, it might be one of their revenge games. We'll
Hmm.
see how it goes though.
Well, anyways. Yep, excited for the second half. Get to go to another game for the Cavs as well, for myself.
Well, we got some breaking news right now. Our Cleveland Cavaliers says from Shams. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, you're good.
throw this in before we end. It says from Shams, New Orleans Pelicans forward Javante Green has agreed to a buyout and intends to sign with the Cleveland Cavaliers, sources tell ESPN, which gets some additional wing depth for the East Best Cavs. I mean, I think that's just kind of a depth piece. I don't have a whole lot to say,
Yeah.
but always good to have some solid depth that can play if heaven forbid injuries tend to stack up or anything. So
And I guess you're the first person to hear about that because that hasn't even popped up on my
I
feed.
told I told you, David, I got the notifications on from Shams. Comes
Because
right
I was
up.
just looking at it, I was trying to find it. So,
Just like the Luca trade, it pops right up on my phone. Or in this case, it pops right up on my watch. So
okay. Well, anyways, thank you again for listening uh, to another episode of Nothing But Net. Thank you, Evan, for coming back on. Hopefully, we get to do another one sometime soon. Maybe
I
not
hope so. I hope
a year in
so.
advance down the
I
road.
hope so.
But yeah, thank you for coming on. And until next time.